I'm Jason Sylvia, and this is the Creative Capital Show. A show about creative people and how those creative people turn into entrepreneurs by taking their creativity and turning it into a business and facing all the trials and tribulations along the way. When we think of photography, we at times tend to think of fashion magazines, journalism, weddings, or street photography. But how often do we think about photography as a means of self-expression, an artistic medium, a political tool, or a catalyst for change? Well, one person thought about all of that and more. This episode's guest, Kannetha Brown. Kannetha's photographic work is social commentary, self-expression, and at the same time, a reflection of her own upbringing. In this episode, I sit down with Kannetha and talk about photography as fine art, how artistic mediums can bring empowerment, why representation is important, why film must be preserved, why certain photographic formats have a political history, shooting for Rolling Stone, and being an award-winning photographer at the age of 22. Kannetha Brown, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
It's hot as unholy hell outside.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
But thank you for booking this library.
Yep.
And we're in a nice air-conditioned room, so I guess we can't complain too much.
No.
But I don't know. I'm not gonna get political, but if you're gonna deny global warming's a thing,
I know.
I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about that today. We're gonna talk about some other stuff, though.
Cool.
We're gonna talk about you. And actually, let's start off. If somebody's, if for whatever reason you clicked on this show and you didn't read the title card, or just you just clicked and didn't think about it, and didn't read anything on the episode intro, or didn't listen to the episode intro. First off, why are you listening to this now? But secondly, if that person, they didn't know who you were, could you give us a little quick introduction?
Sure. My name's Kannetha. I'm 22. I go to Mass Art in Boston for photography. I live in Providence, and I'm a photographer. I've worked with clients such as Rolling Stone, Bellesa, and Parade, and my fine art work deals with gender and race mostly, and yeah.
We're going to get into all of that, because this is going to be the feel-good comedic episode. And that was sarcasm, people, if you can pick up on that. It's not going to be a downer. I'm just saying, we're going to deal with some heavy stuff. As there's, if you can hear possibly children in the background. I didn't put that there as a sound effect. People, if somebody's like, oh wow, he's like getting real surreal on the sound effects he's putting in the background. That wasn't me. That was just really ironic timing. Anyway, so here's the first thing I want to ask you, and on this show I don't really go in chronological order with questions. It's more just to kind of get the story of you going. So we're gonna come out the gate pretty strong with this one. Tell me, what came first? Because I noticed, if somebody goes on to your Linktree page, from your Instagram, it says either photographer and activist, or artist and activist.
Mm-hmm.
So what came first, the art or the activism?
I would say that the art did come first, but my personality has always been very outwardly activist, if that makes sense. And when I discovered that art has the power to influence a lot of change, that can provide support for a lot of unsupported people, then I started to meld the two. But for a while, when I was a kid, it was mostly just, this is something I like to do. And it wasn't until I really started to understand what politics were, maybe around the 2016 elections. That's when things started to become really evident in my personality on how passionate I am about topics like this.
And so just going along with that, because I think it's interesting, like, photography was not the first artistic medium that you were involved in, because you were a dancer and an actress for like 15 years. And so you were doing that. Was the activist part of you part of that time as well? Or was the activist part of you was when you found photography? And can you talk about just being an actress and dancing and how that's informed, the stuff you do now?
Absolutely. So I couldn't really find any ways to incorporate activism in dancing or acting. That was just a part of my personality that was separate from that. And there wasn't really a place for that anywhere because I do come from a very conservative household. So dancing and acting was my outlet. And it was mostly because I liked being in charge of creating things, if that made sense. Like I really liked choreographing and directing things. And then I started to bring that into photography, which is basically just, it is kind of like painting because you're just like making these scenes for the camera or capturing scenes that are already there, if that makes sense.
So just to side, this is not one of the original questions I had, but I think it's interesting when you said you grew up in a more conservative household. But then again, you're doing the acting and the dancing thing. Were your parents more, because I think it's interesting when some people are like, hey, my parents supported my art or conversely, like my parents think I'm not going to make any money at this, and they were completely against it.
Yeah.
Were they more supportive because you were doing it for so long? I'm assuming they were supportive of the art, and they were just like, hey, that's your thing, or did they have some reservations about it?
I think that there was more reservations coming from my mom's side for the majority of my life. And I know now as a young adult that it comes from a place of like concern for me. But I took a gap year after I graduated high school because I knew that I wanted to be a photographer, but I didn't really know anything about going to school for that. And I already like was going to go somewhere else for something else. And like that was probably like the worst time for my mom and I's relationship, if that makes sense. Like it wasn't, I don't think she really understood that you could turn photography into a career because she's an immigrant, and that's like totally understandable. But everything that I love about photography I don't even think that I learned it. It's passed through my blood. Like my mom is an incredible photographer. So like it's like even at my Cortland show a couple weeks ago, like I got her there and I'm starting to get her like involved to understand things more. But I think that there's still a little bit of hesitation on her end that like wondering if I can make money from this.
And I'm glad you brought those things up early, because that's kind of that's like one of the core things of the show is like balancing the creative and the money. And we're definitely going to get into that. But I'm also glad you mentioned your mom. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, she, like you're saying, I think you just said you loved her photography. She was documenting her experiences of coming over here from Cambodia, if I'm not mistaken, in her 20s and 30s. Is that one of the things that made you choose photography as your medium? And what was it like discovering those photographs? Because like you said, conservative household, concerns about can you make money off of it, and then you're like, oh damn, I didn't know my mom did this. So was it finding that your mom did it, seeing her photography, which made you want to go into photography yourself, or was it you were already wanting to go into photography, you saw her stuff, and that made you want to pursue it more?
In a way, it was like kind of both, because I didn't like realize until later that I had seen it and that's what I wanted. But for a while, it was just like I was just kind of coasting. I knew that film and photography was like something that interested me. And then as I got older, I understood that it was because I grew up surrounded by her photographs. And that's primarily why I got into film photography, was because that's what she was doing. And I wanted really badly for my photos to emulate similar aesthetics and like feelings from her pictures. So yeah, I think analog is in our blood. Her, my grandma, and I all are obsessed with it.
So, and you're still at Mass Art, right? You haven't
Yes.
graduated
Yeah.
yet. Okay. What made you? Because you had briefly touched upon this, and I think it was something that is a good segue into this question. What made you go the route of mass art and going to school? Because I had read in another interview that, and you were mentioning you took the gap year, but like you really didn't like school. So it's interesting, somebody who really didn't like school took a gap year to go away from it, and is wondering, can I really make money at this thing that I love? Like realistically, like can I survive off of it? Hey, let's invest money into it and go to school. And even though I hate school, so what made you go the route of, mass art versus, trying to learn on your own, or just like, hey, just pick up a camera and start shooting and see what happens?
Yeah. So I haven't been this transparent in like any interviews, but I'm going to be transparent that the reason why I ended up not continuing the gap year and just staying out of school is because I've said before that I needed direction, but I was also just like very mentally ill. Like I didn't have any sort of direction, which made things worse. And I figured out that going to school was going to pull me out of that mental space. I was fully intent of leaving after the first year because I had this like weird stubbornness to myself where I was like, I'm going to hate it. It's not going to help my mental whatever. And it ended up helping despite half of my freshman year being in person and the rest COVID happened. And I was home for about a year and a half doing school online. It like mass art ended up like literally being an incredible experience for me. The first year was obviously rough because it's like you don't do photography your first year. You do like standard foundation classes. But I knew that there was connections to be made and things to learn there that I wasn't going to have access to anywhere else. And for some of the jobs that I had, having the mass art name on my resume was helping, or just having a school there, honestly, was helping. I could have gone anywhere else. I could have gone to RISD. I live right down the street, but it is expensive. And ultimately, like, mass art was cheaper. It was more like the people were more down to earth. And I just like realized all of the potential that my art had and like learned what photography even was at this school.
What do you think the benefits are? Because I think there is pros and cons to, like, like you're mentioning with RISD, right? RISD's expensive, so not everybody has the money to pay for any college, whether it be a community college, RISD, Mass Art, etc. So there's that benefit of when you just do it yourself, just learning as you go. But then there's benefits of being at a school, even with the unconventional school experience, because COVID interrupted that, right?
Yeah.
There is kind of like a community with your classmates, and like you have people to guide you, can ask questions, things of that nature. So at least for you, because you're saying it did pull you out of like a bad mental state, what were the benefits of the college experience? And have you ever thought what it would have been like, pro or con wise, if you just picked up a camera and started shooting instead of going to school?
So picking up a camera and doing it myself was basically what I set my mind to during the gap year. It's how I made my connections. It's how I grew my Instagram following, all of that kind of stuff. That all happened during the gap year. And that's why I would suggest that at some point, whether you're a student or not, to at least have like a semester's worth of time where you are focusing like on your craft, like a lot. You can still be working or going to school, or you could even like do a gap year. But I feel like having the time to really focus on it is important for any artist. But there's also like you said, there's downsides and good things about college. Like it's expensive. And also like, I don't know, it might not be for everybody. But art school, like for me, it was just, I don't know. It helped. I really don't know how else to describe it, but it helped. It helped me make connections and learn more about the medium, and really like allowed me to realize my potential as an artist. But then again, like there's some stuff that I'm not being taught at school, like business side of photography. That's something I had to teach to myself completely.
And I definitely want to get into that in a little bit. And it's why this podcast exists, everybody.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the reasons.
Yeah.
I do have a question on trying to figure out the right way to word this, because I think there is some nuance to it. In the essence of like bettering your skills, right? And I think with your particular type of photography, it does lean more on the creative rather than maybe like the commercials types. And I want to ask about that too. How do you balance, or what advice would you give to balance the technical skills, like, sharpening the sword, so to speak, and just getting those skills down versus furthering the creative? Because there's got to be a balance there. And has there ever been times where you're leaning in one and then the other one kind of falls and then you have to rebalance? I've always been interested in that, where it's like, how do you balance, like, I need to learn these technical techniques to make the art better, but then also, like, can they be hindrances? Like, how do you balance that yourself?
Yeah, I would say that, like, I feel like the only way to get technically and creatively better is to just keep practicing both at the same time. But when I am in school, I don't really make money off commercial stuff because my head is so far deep in like the creative stuff. So it's a tough question. Like, it's hard. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So I do have a question about, you're talking about like how you're into the analog, right? And you're into film. That is your chosen medium. And there is different types of photography. It can be film, digital, etc. Did that passion for specifically film photography, did that happen before school? Did that happen during your time in school? Was it amplified during your time in school? Could you talk about that a little bit? Because, a lot of other interviews I've read, and just even with the projects that you put out, there is an emphasis on film. And you even did a talk, I think you're a panelist on, preserving film. And it's really important to you. Can you just go through like the origins of why that is?
Yeah. So when I came to Mass Art, I had maybe like a 10% interest in film, only because I didn't know how to like access it or how to use it. But I knew that the majority of the photographers I was looking at were using film. And then once I got into my sophomore year and I learned that we would be doing film and whatnot, my interest really sparked and I realized I had the resources to just start learning. Unfortunately, we did have to take out a semester of film because of COVID and they turned it digital. So I took that semester to teach myself exactly what I wasn't going to be learning. But yeah.
And I'm going to get a bit specific. All right, this is the Nardwuar moment here, people. I'm going to get a bit specific. I'm glad you're laughing and because some people don't get that reference. No, I know
exactly what you mean.
That love of film, and then from the photographers that you looked up to. Could you tell me more about the show Fall River Boys?
Okay, Fall River Boys wasn't. Yeah, so there was a show, and then there was like a book, and it was so basically, Fall River Boys by Richard Rinaldi was, I'm not sure how long the project went on, but it was a long time, and it was in the early 2000s. And it was this epic project where Richard went to Fall River and photographed young men on the street. And this project absolutely blew my mind. It was shot on large format black and white film, which I knew I was going to be learning in the semester following when I saw this exhibition. I followed the Fall River Museum of Contemporary Art on Instagram, and I saw that they were showing this project. So I grabbed one of my professors and I was like, we have to go see this. And seeing the prints in real life was incredible. And I just realized that no one was there was a lot more representation in the large format film community of white communities. So I was like, we need to get more representation for Asian people in this medium and tell their stories within their own cities and communities. So that's exactly what I did when I realized that I had the power to do that and there was no time to question my ability. I just threw myself into it, if that makes sense.
And I want to touch upon a couple of things you just mentioned and some questions that are going to be further out. One thing I want to ask, and when you're saying trusting your abilities and pushing yourself into it, because I think it perfectly leads to this question. can you go through either, because I'm curious, was there either like your first exhibition or like your first commercial project or your first paid project? And like, can you walk me through what that was like, just that entire process and how all that worked?
Yeah. I think maybe, sorry, I'm thinking we might have to cut this out. I don't know. I guess I started doing all of this so young that I had to trust my gut with anything and just kind of risk a lot of things when accepting jobs. Like Rolling Stone, my first job with them happened when I was 19 and I didn't like know anything. I just knew how to take pictures.
Was that like the first commercial job? Was Rolling Stone?
I would say the first big commercial job. I can't like think off the top of my head.
Gotcha.
But I know that there was plenty.
It's a pretty
of
big
like,
first one.
Yeah, there's like
no big deal. It's just Rolling Stone. You
little
know?
like brands and stuff before that, but that was a big deal for me, and I just kind of like acted like I knew what I was doing on the phone with them, and then just was like, all right, let's go.
Did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? Really, they reached out to you. How did they find out about you?
All of my huge jobs come through Instagram. Like Instagram hashtags work for me. They work for a lot of photographers. And if you like really specify in hashtags like where you are and what you do, like Providence photographer, it'll be really easy for like casting agents or photo editors to find you.
And so quick side question before because I really do want you to walk through like just what that whole experience was like that first big commercial job. But quick side question, do you think there's an importance on like the way somebody promotes themselves in their work and like the platform they choose? Like, right, because like you said, Instagram, which makes sense, at least before, who knows now with the way Facebook is running it, but before, in its inception, Instagram was and still is to a degree. It's getting to look more like TikTok, for better or worse. A social media platform and a way for photographers to put this stuff out. And you have your website and things like that. So just to get a little bit more on the tactical, what made you choose Instagram besides some of the reasons I noted over like maybe a Pinterest? And then like, how did you go about choosing your website and how you structured it and like what you wanted to show and things of that nature? Because I think that is a tactical thing that's not everybody thinks about sometimes, no matter what their medium is.
Yeah, I think Instagram was the right thing for me because it was what everybody else is doing. I found that the photographers that I looked up to before I even got into all of this use their Instagram as like a secondary or for some a primary portfolio. The cool thing about it, as much as it's like tedious and annoying to deal with, the cool thing is people can like directly contact you and like have all of your work at their fingertips, which is something that people at Rolling Stone or whoever don't have the time to go look up your website and like figure out X, Y, and Z. Like Instagram is really easy for them. And they also can see like who you're connected with and blah, blah, blah. With my website, I use Squarespace. It's like pretty typical for a photographer. There's like stuff that I don't like about it, but it's like the most standard easy thing for me to use that like I feel like will like appeal to photo editors and stuff.
Are you looking into like other platforms at all, or are you like watching like what's like, I just made that joke about Instagram looking like TikTok, but it is happening. Is there anything in the back of your mind that's like, oh, I have this website and I have this, but I'm gonna have to start like looking at other platforms, or at least thinking about how I'm gonna like port stuff over, or is that not entered your head yet?
TikTok was like on my mind for like 2 seconds, and then I just kind of realized that like not to be harsh, but I do feel like TikTok has the ability to skyrocket artists into the spotlight that haven't worked nearly as hard as the rest of us, to be completely honest. And it's frustrating. So I just kind of realized like TikTok photography accounts, like they do allow photographers to get a lot more jobs and exposure, but at the same time, like it's not really where I want to be getting the work that I want, if that makes sense.
Or like the work that you're trying to get
Yes.
is not, maybe not there. At least not right now.
Yeah.
It's gonna lead into another question I have. But go back to what we were saying, that Rolling Stone being that first big commercial job. Can you just walk through the entire process? And I mean from like they reach out to you, what were those conversations? What were those like? How were you feeling? How they explained the job to you? What information you had to give them going through the job, and then how did you get paid? Like that whole thing. If you could walk through that, I think that'd be a good story there, and I think that'd be beneficial to anybody listening to this.
Yeah. It's definitely like, I think just the name of the client puts a lot more stress on it than it actually like was, if that makes sense. Like it was really easy every time that I worked with them. Basically, I got an email from one of their photo editors. She asked if this is the one thing that you're going to get when you do editorial work. They'll ask you the week of if you can come in and do the shoot. Unless it's like maybe for a cover or something, you might have a little more leeway in time. But I'm pretty sure every single time I've worked with them, it's been 2 days before, a week before, the week of, whatever. But I got contacted, asked to hop on a phone call, discussed basically what they were looking for. It was great. The photo editor was really nice and like really complimentary of my work, which I was really surprised about. Because some photo editors can just like want someone and not really care like who it is or whatever. So yeah, it was like great working with them. We got set up with a music group to do a little editorial on them for web and print. What
was the name of the music group?
I don't know how to pronounce their name, but it's like Anjamile. This Boston folk musician, I believe. And then the other ones were not with musicians. It was with like certain public figures.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Was that for you? Because you were talking about how, you know, your mom had a concern for you, like, hey, can you really make money off this ... Was that first big commercial, like Rolling Stone reaching out to you, and then real quick, how did you get paid? Like, did you have to provide them like or did you have to set yourself up as like an LLC or a contract, or how did you go about that? Did they tell you like, hey, we like, are you an LLC or are you a general contractor? Like, what is, so they can pay you correctly?
Yeah. Every job that I've had has been just me being an independent contractor. It's basically like any other job. You get like the W-9 or whatever. Some jobs I've had, they like have me input my information into a system and I get paid through that way. But it's really just like a regular job. It's either direct deposit or you get a check, and that's it, if that answers it.
Are you paid like weeks after the shoot, or?
Yeah, that's the annoying thing about freelancing. It's usually net 30, so you have to wait for a little while for the check to be processed and then for it to arrive.
So like, you know, you have money coming in, but it may be after, like it may be after when the bills are due, so you got to like balance that out. Yeah. Gotcha. And also another just quick side question, because I think this might be good from a tactical standpoint. Are you set up at yourself as like an LLC, like a limited liability company? I see you nodding your head. Yeah.
No.
Oh, no,
I'm just like nodding. Yeah. So I'm working on figuring that out right now. I'm still an independent sole proprietor, whatever it's called. But I am interested now in becoming an LLC or something else because I'm making more money than like a sole proprietor should be, if that makes sense. For some of the jobs, like it might look weird, my dad said.
Do you mind putting a dollar figure on that, or do you not want to?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if I feel comfortable with it.
But no pressure. It's up to you.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, some of the recent jobs that I've had, I realized where the money is, if that makes sense. So there you go.
I want you to hold on to that thought.
Yes.
so many segues to so many things. Yeah. And also, you know, since you're kind of trying to set yourself up as an LLC, maybe it's a good test run for Liz Tanner, if you're listening to this. Because I know you were trying to make it easier to get an LLC set up. Yes. I may have to,
pair us up.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say once that project is done and you know that overhaul happens.
Yeah.
Or maybe we should do it as a test run now. I may be, you know, my guest here. We may actually just do a run through. We'll see, Liz. We're gonna be reaching out to you.
I need help.
If it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Just saying. Just saying. See how I tie in all the episodes? I really don't. That was actually just that. I'd like to think so, but I'm not far from it. Anyway, I'm glad you had mentioned a couple of those things, realizing where the money is and things of that nature. So one thing was that that first bigger commercial project. Was that a moment for you where it was like, oh wow, I can make a living off of this? Was that like the aha moment, or was there a different moment where you like that light went off? Because I think for everybody it's different.
So the second time I shot for Rolling Stone was when the light went off for like, oh, I know what I'm doing and these people like me enough to ask me to come back. But then like recently with some of the other jobs that I've had, I was like, oh, I can survive. I can make a living off of this. Screw all the people that told me otherwise. I've got lots of tea on that. But yeah.
I mean, feel free to spill it here if you want.
I mean, I can, but it might take a long time. I'll say one thing. Being a woman in this industry is really tough. I had a male boss for a little while that I was assisting. Hope he doesn't see this, but he basically told me that everything I was doing had no market. He was saying that pictures of chicks and whatever like are not gonna appeal to anybody, and I got hired to do exactly that and was making as much money as he bragged to me that he made. So yeah, that's been like my aha moment recently where I'm just like, I can do this. But the Rolling Stone thing definitely, like, I cried the second time. I was like, wait, like, people like me and I'm doing a good job. So
actually, speaking of that, what was that? Was that what made you, or was that a catalyst for you picking like commercial, editorial, fine art style of photography versus like doing other types of photography that may or may not make more money? And the reason why I say may or may not is having this conversation with a guest on the show who's also a photographer, Brittany Taylor, and it was interesting, hearing her, information and opinions on things like these higher end magazines, these really like nice fashion mags, like you think with the prestige of that name, like they're paying the photographers this crazy amount of money.
I did not get paid that much at Rolling Stone.
And so like, and
like
it's
a lot, but not enough.
But it's not like what maybe the general public would perceive, because it's just like they hear that name, like a Rolling Stone or a Vogue, which I think you shot for. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so it's interesting that like, public perception, oh, you must be, just like, you got the bag, right? And it's like, nah, it's not really like that. So, so knowing that, did you have a conscious decision before the Rolling Stone gig? Like, I'm going to do commercial, fine art, editorial, or were you just naturally leaning more towards that anyway? Like, and why those areas? Because there's different types. There's street photography, right? There's strictly fashion photography. There's wedding photography, which
makes a lot of money.
And that's what Brittany said also. Like,
my friend just bought a house off
like this wedding, wedding photography. So if you want the bag, like, hey, but not everybody does that. So what made you want to choose those specific ones that is your wheelhouse? Like, did you before, or did you kind of more just like naturally evolve into that?
I think it was like a natural evolution because it was like what people wanted my style of work for. And I don't like feel super confident in like my e-commerce ability and like stuff like that. I just know that it's easier for me to make something artistic than it is for me to make something like really clean cut and commercial. But then again, like, I realized recently that like where the money is at is like commercial stuff. And there's people out there nowadays with TikTok and Instagram becoming more popular and people demanding more artistic campaigns. People are hiring me to make artistic commercial campaigns. And that's like where the future is heading. Yeah.
Gotcha. And sorry, my phone decided to go off because I'm not going to edit that out either. I'm just going to leave it like, listen, you're hearing the real story here, people. Like, we edit some stuff out, but not funny little things like that. I'm really sorry that I underscored what you were saying, but no, I agree. It is interesting that you evolved into that, and then now it's aligning, right? It's from what you're telling me. Another question that, just kind of, we were talking about like the LLC thing versus sole proprietorship. And I've heard quotes from other types of artists that have said something to this effect. Do you yourself see yourself as a brand and or a company? Yeah or no? And then just depending on your answer, why?
No, because I just feel like too independent for that. Like every time I want an assistant to help me with either like on-set tasks or like the behind the scenes stuff, I end up just wanting to do all of it myself. So far, like I don't really see myself becoming a brand or a company, but I feel like the like universal goal and like statements behind like what I do is kind of a brand, if that makes sense. I don't know.
So like, do you think in the future, like as your work like grows, do you think you'll be trying to run everything yourself and like, okay, I'm gonna have to learn the business side, or are you gonna like try and port that off to somebody else?
Yeah, I'm really hoping that within like the next 2 years after I graduate that I can get signed to an agent so I can have like a manager and agent taking over the logistical stuff, because I can't really like handle all of this right now. But I'm also like hoping to get that so I can get more commercial work.
And we were talking about the different avenues when it comes to photography, right? Going along with that, it seems like there's separations between photography where, even with the work you do, which we're going to get into that in a bit as well, between like it's just documenting versus like the commercial versus the creative where it's storytelling. It seems like there is separations, but me as somebody on the outside, like it's really hard to tell where those separations exist. So you being as somebody behind the lens, could you maybe shed some light, or are they all intertwined, or is it more just on the perception of whoever's viewing it, or is it a number of things?
I think that like my work, there's a lot of overlap. Like I feel like the commercial stuff recently, people are hiring me because of the mission that I have in my personal work, if that makes sense, for like diversity and like representation. Yeah. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it answers it. And then speaking of your work, just walking through the process and the tactical, because you've done a number of solo and group exhibitions, and you were talking about like getting like a manager or an agent, which I'm assuming you don't have now. But it seems like having a manager or an agent is the way to get, yourself or any other photographer into solo and group exhibitions. So could you, as somebody who doesn't have that at this time, can you walk through the process of like, how do you set up a solo exhibition? How do you become a part of a group exhibition? Because I think there's probably a lot of moving parts. We were talking earlier about how something got canceled and rescheduled. So could you walk through that just from like, hey, you find out there's an exhibition that's going to be happening to like the night of the exhibition, and then how do you get paid off of that? I think that's interesting too.
So I think that group exhibitions are a lot easier to get into than solo. Group ones, I usually just look for calls for art, and I'm like really connected with different art groups that like curate and host exhibitions within the New England area. As for like solo exhibitions, that's only been really being planned and like happening recently because of my community connections. Like it's been easier for me this year to say, hey, I've been working in the community for a while. You guys know who I am. Would you be interested in just hosting a show of just my work? And some of them have been like invitational, which is really awesome. But in order to have like a solo exhibition that isn't at like a really hoity-toity gallery, like, you know what I mean? It's like you really gotta get involved in the community, and you gotta have connections, and people have to like be interested or care about the work that you're making.
Gotcha. Going along with that, right? Because you have a very, we were talking about like what came first, the art or the activism, right? And it seems like the activism is intertwined with your work, which is not always the case for every creative, but it seems like it's intertwined with your work and the projects that you do. was that something from the onset, or was that more of an evolutionary thing as well?
I think it was an evolutionary thing. I think maybe for like a year and a half or so, I was just taking pictures to take pictures the way I liked. And then maybe my second year doing photography, I realized that I liked working with women more than I liked working with men just because of like a safety thing. And then from there, my work started to deal a lot with like gender and sexuality. And then from there, it started turning into me feeling the confidence to finally like explore a really hard issue in my life, which was like ethnicity and race. So that's like kind of where the work has evolved.
And gonna hold on a couple of those things there because it's gonna lead into other questions I have. A little bit more on the tactical, and then we're gonna go into the creative. What, in your opinion, separates? And again, I guess it's based on who's viewing the work, but like, what in your opinion separates a good photographer from like a bad, objectively bad photographer, or like a professional photographer versus a non-professional? Or is there no separation? Is it just based on like who's looking at the work?
I think like for the good versus bad question, I feel like a photographer who pays too much attention to their equipment and the technical side are missing out on what makes actually a good photograph. And then what was the other half of the question? It was professional versus non-professional. I think there's a really like it's hard to find the resources to know how to be a professional and run your own business. But I think that like the internet is this like really huge place where you can take that small step and go down the rabbit hole of learning how to be a professional. But yeah.
And couple of things. One, when it comes to you're saying focus on the technical and things like that. Like I know you have like your preferences for gear, like everybody does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially because you shoot on medium format film, and I want to get into that in a bit too. But a Canon AE1, I think you shoot on a Pentax. Why those pieces of gear, and have you ever run into issues, or have you seen things where it's like gear envy, or like gear as like almost like a gatekeeping thing? Like I can't tell you how many times, like, just from completely different thing, but like DJing, and I think talked about this on the Sega Gen episode, where it's like you're not a legit DJ unless you have like this kind of equipment. It's like, have you run into that in the photography, or have you seen it and like does it make you want to roll your eyes and go like, really? Like,
yeah, I see it all the time, but that's not the type of environment I like to create within my community. Like the cameras that I use are for the cameras that I use mainly have to do because of the cheapness of them. Cameras can get really expensive. And also like with medium format or large format cameras, I'm using the ones that I'm using because of portability and like weight. I'm not super into like, oh, like if you want to be a real photographer, you got to shoot Leica. Well, I can't spend $5,000 on glass. Like it's stuff like that where I don't really like, I think that you can make good work with anything. And if you're caught up in what you're using, then you're not going to be focused on the right thing.
Gotcha. Going along with that, you had your first like the first bigger job, Rolling Stone, and then now you work on more like commercial, then editorial, and like the fine art aspect. You do group and solo exhibition shows, group exhibition shows. Can you walk through the process of, and has it changed of, do a lot of people reach out to you? Do you reach out to people? Is it a mix? Is it depending on the project? And like how does that process work of like, are you searching out clients, or is it more clients seeking you out now specifically?
Mostly clients are reaching out to me. In the past, it was a little more of a mix of me reaching out to people and offering my services, as well as people reaching out to me. But now I'm in a place where I am just kind of like in limbo waiting for people because I am working a second job right now. So it's just like what's easiest for me. And it also like allows me to like rest a little bit in between shoots. Like this school year was like so much shooting that I just needed a break a little bit over the summer. But mostly it's people reaching out to me through Instagram or sometimes through LinkedIn, like email, whatever. And yeah.
Going with your gut. One thing I really appreciate about creatives and entrepreneurs is the passion they have for whatever it is they're doing. And Kannetha definitely has a passion for photography as both an art form and a means for social commentary. So much so that she knew she would earn a living and that her style of photography had a market, even when her own teacher told her that market didn't exist. She knew something her teacher and others didn't. She knew that the market was going to catch up to her and her style of photography, and now it's paying dividends both financially and critically. So when it comes to creative work, when it comes to your business, sometimes you just know. Sometimes you just need to go with your gut. So now, you have clients, you did the commercial, things of that nature. Was there a specific project or first exhibition where, 'cause like you said, it was an evolution of the art and the activism being intertwined. Was there a particular like point where that started? Meaning, was there like a first exhibition or a first show where it's like, hey, this is a topic that I want to shed some light on. This is a topic I want to talk about. I'm going to do this because these are things that are important to me. Was there like a first show or first exhibition or first project that you can speak to where that happened, and what was that like?
I would say it's mostly been me looking at other people's shows or like whatever that really got me into it. Like Richard Rinaldi's show, or just like at Mass Art, we're really lucky. Every week or so, we have practicing photographers come in on Zoom and talk to us. And like a lot of those photographers that I've been exposed to talking about photographing within their own communities and shedding a light on those narratives has inspired me to make what I wasn't seeing.
You're starting to intertwine the activism in your work, taking on projects, taking on jobs or taking on things that allow you to express your views, and what you want to see through your medium. And you mentioned representation. And I think that's, it's important, but it's interesting that, and you may have a differing opinion on this, but I want to get your opinion on this. Do you think there's a reason why there's a focus, even like the general public, on representation now? And what do you think is happening now, whether it's your specific community or just different communities in general, where like representation is more of a part of the conversation now than years ago, whether it's in photography or whether it's in other mediums?
Yeah, I would say that there's like, the first thing that came to my head was like what we commonly see in like the media with like commercial advertising. There's been a lot more requests for representation, and I would call that performative activism. I think that there are some companies and artists who are like genuinely interested in just like representing people, and that's what like the company started out doing. Like that's why they made it. But I would also say that like there's plenty of other companies that have just recently hopped on the bandwagon because they know that after what's happened recently in the past like 3 years with like just human rights in this country, I think that a lot of companies know that there's pressure on them to appeal to people who want representation, because now like representation is trendy, if that makes sense. And I can like really like quickly say that like I've had jobs or like seen people in charge want models specifically to check off boxes, not because they actually like want to represent that community, if that makes sense.
So a question on that, because I think that definitely does happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way. That's one reason as to why the words in the conversation. It's like to check off the box, and I guess let's be honest, like companies. I had a conversation about this the other day where a friend of mine was saying like, oh, I think like some of these companies they're like going way too much to the other side, become too woke, and I'm like, I think for a lot of these companies, it's not about them actually like really caring. I think it's just about money. Like it's just like people, there's people different demographics now who have spending power. They always did have spending power, but now they're starting to recognize they have spending power. It's like, let's make content or things that will appeal to them so we can make more money. So it's not really like necessarily like a place where the company actually cares about those people, right? It's just, it's money. It's pure profit.
Yeah.
With that being said, do you think that I want to say like, do you think that's a bad thing? Because it's like definitely not a good thing. But do you think that there's maybe opportunities there and like there are positive opportunities that can come out of that maybe negative thing? Like, hey, like, yeah, I know they just want to check the checkbox, but had they not wanted to check the checkbox, then certain people wouldn't have gotten opportunities that now they can get. And hey, you can use that as a launching off point, maybe. And I don't know. And I'm just asking this question just out of pure curiosity.
Yeah. In my opinion, like I've had this conversation so many times with people, and I think that as much as performative activism is really messed up, I also think that for the people being represented, it can be a really good thing because it will open up opportunities and doors for more representation and job opportunities. But for the company, it will never really be a good thing. It will always just be about profit.
So with that going, if we're going to go along with that reasoning, that line of thinking, right? How can somebody who is looking at something like that and going like, this is clearly performative, like, there probably are some companies out there I can't name off the top of my head, but like that really do maybe give a damn, but like for the ones that don't, it purely is performative activism, right? Have there been ways that you've utilized that, like, let's turn this into a positive, or let's see the silver lining in this, or like, and if not personally, but what are the ways that somebody could? I guess more in the tactical sense.
It's tough because like when I'm thinking about people in the position who are creating like advertisements or whatever that have the power to like represent, it's usually like white people, if that makes sense. So like I feel like what needs to happen is there needs to be more opportunities for people of color or like queer people to be in these positions that are like hiring and like choosing who's being represented. But like, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what else. Yeah, like it's hard to say like what you should do because it's just like you should just like genuinely care about representing people. I don't know like how else to say it, but it's tough. Like I feel like I think you can be in that position of power and want to represent, but you just need to do it in a way that isn't like pouncing on people and like treating them like objects, you know?
Do you think maybe it could also be maybe not the people within the company, but the company itself? Like the company is such a huge entity where like they have to maybe water things down or make it, saccharine because hopefully that's the right word, like sugar, like saccharin, like because they have to get such a wide market share of everybody. So it's like, hey, we have to please everyone, but by pleasing everyone, they're like, oh, it's only to a certain extent, like they're actually pleasing no one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I guess it's just hard for me to like see any of it being super positive because at the end of the day, like it's really just about profit and representing to get profit. I don't know.
So then do you think the alternative is that if at least for right now, there aren't people in those companies that are in positions to make those bigger decisions, maybe like, hey, keep fighting for that, but at the same time, like hey, let's just do our own things and make our own projects and make them loud enough and big enough and profitable enough that either like it forces the hand, or it's like it's so big that, or it's well known enough to the point where it's self-sustaining and we don't need
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very tough question to answer, but I think, I don't know if this has anything to do with the question, but I feel like small businesses and smaller artists, I feel like, are doing a more genuine job and effort to like be representative, if that makes sense, because a lot of like smaller companies, even if they start small and get big, like usually start off because of a need for something.
So actually, I think that brings up an interesting point. Do you think, because you work in both the commercial and in like the fine art space, so I think this brings up an interesting question. Do you think it's better to try and shoot for those big projects, or do you think, because then you have to deal with like getting paid later? There's probably more bureaucracy. Like I know Rolling Stone is a magazine about music and it's creative people, but like it's a company, like, and it's part of a bigger publishing house and things of that nature, right? So there's probably more gears that have to be moved to get something done versus working with the smaller business. So at least from your experience, have you seen like, pros or cons versus like being I guess working with the bigger, more established versions versus working with the smaller businesses and being nimble and being able to make decisions faster?
Yeah, I think that working with smaller companies or magazines or whatnot is always easier because, as you said, like there's less um, in the way from you getting like what needs to be done. And despite usually those jobs sometimes paying less, like I feel like it's easier for you to connect with people on them as well. But with the bigger commercial jobs, like it can be really tempting to just wait around for those to happen. But I've noticed that with some of the bigger or like really well paying commercial jobs that I've done, those have been the ones where there's been the most really messed up problems on set that have to do with working for an institution, which is like you said, like this giant bureaucracy that's going to come with all of these other problems of like hierarchy and like not actually caring about the campaign itself, but rather like the money that the campaign will make.
So touching upon something that you were talking about before, because I think this flows into my next question. You were mentioning how you liked working with women, with females, and how you wanted to capture the female, perspective, the female body. And I've seen that in a number of different pieces and exhibitions and stuff in your work, which is amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
Welcome. Because the photography has traditionally been, male dominated.
Yeah.
So two-parter. One, do you think that a male photographer can capture the female experience accurately and not have it be in a way that's like negative? Is that possible?
No, I don't think it's possible. I think you can only make work about an identity that you have yourself. Like, I feel like you can make work about communities that you don't look like, but you won't be able to like photography, cameras, whatever, like all of that is an extension of yourself. It's an extension of how you see. So like, I feel like there's just a really obvious, specific touch that female photographers have when portraying certain issues or just like narratives. And this goes for like any aspect of identity, like ability, race, gender, sexuality, whatever. Like I feel like people can make work about other things, but it's just like really hard to really show something if you don't experience it.
So if you're not experiencing that thing, then it's going to be very hard to.
Yeah, like you can
about
do
it.
something, but it's just gonna come with maybe controversy, and it may not be exactly like, I don't know. It's just, yeah, like you have to be it to show it. I don't know. That's why it's like important to shed light on artists or people who are like bringing those narratives that we don't often see into the spotlight. Like part of the reason why I started doing the Asian American thesis project on large format was because the majority of pictures of Asian people on large format were taken like by white people during immigration. And sometimes these images were used as like propaganda against Asian people. And this goes for other races as well. I would say like in the Black community that like large format photography was used even more exploitatively with them. Like they would use images to make it seem like segregation or slavery wasn't a bad thing. And we're distributing these images to the white audience. So yeah, it's important to have people that look like the photos that they're making, if that makes sense, in these positions. And like, I think that things are going to start getting better with representation. But yeah.
So that leads to a couple of questions. One, specifically about a medium, right? Mm-hmm. Analog mediums like film, but also I read that, you like working in the medium film format because there's some preferences there, but that the large film format, I think you just touched upon it here, has been used politically. I'm really curious about that just because the reason why I'm curious is that a medium is a medium, right? Like the photograph, I guess like that type of like doesn't know like who's behind the camera, I guess is like the best way I can describe it. So I'm just curious as to how a medium or a photographic type, outside of like the person actually making the shot, how can that be political? Because I thought it was interesting that like question. That you brought that up, and I was just like, there was a couple of things you referenced that I would like for you to reference now as well. Like when I was reading about this, but it's just interesting where like not just the photographer. In your view, the medium itself is political, and I've never heard somebody saying like, "Oh no, this medium itself is political."
Yeah,
it's usually more about like the person taking the shot or like the viewer, not just like the mechanical medium itself. I guess.
And that's a really good and cool question. And like obviously, the person behind the camera has like a lot to do with like, or in front of the camera, has a lot to do with the politics of the photo. But also like the medium itself, like you said, is really important because like I'm going to bring up like a few examples. Like large format photography is like primarily associated with like tableau or like family portraits because it's such a giant camera that's so not portable that the viewer has to acknowledge its presence. So with photographs, like I mentioned before, that were like staged to be used as propaganda, that's because the large format camera like allows people to like paint those tableaus and like get that point across. Whereas something like medium format or 35 millimeter, someone that immediately came up for me was Gordon Parks, who is a photographer that was like photographing segregation in the South. And his large format photos were obviously like more staged, but the majority of the photos that were of segregation were taken on the more portable cameras because that was when the viewer didn't have to acknowledge his presence and he could show like what was actually happening, if that makes sense.
So then leads into my next question. Is this a driving force as to why you're so passionate about analog film specifically, and more so why you chose medium format, or at least I want to say that you chose like from what I understand and what I've read, that like medium, it seems like medium format film seems to be like the happy medium between like the large format and at least in the analog world versus like smaller format. Is that where that passion for analog, came from, and specifically the passion you have for large format and your preference for medium format film?
Yeah, with work that like really means something that I'm making, like really conceptual or like political work, I primarily use like medium format or large format because of like the historical significance that the mediums have in relation to like politics and efforts for equality and stuff. But I feel like when I need something to happen that I don't have the money to spend large format money on, I'll shoot it on medium. But because large format has such like a heavy like association for me with like history, there are specific things that I would rather take on large format than I would on medium.
Do you have concerns? Because I know you're very passionate about analog and preserving analog. Do you have concerns about digital? Because you were talking about like acknowledging the presence of the camera, where it's like now everybody pretty much has a, I can't see what I'm doing here, people, but like the quote unquote, the quotation marks, high quality camera. And there's been beautiful things that have been shot on an iPhone or on a digital camera. And with these cameras getting smaller and smaller, it can be easier for you to take a shot and not have the subject acknowledge you. Or even if you pull your phone out, it's like, well, everybody's doing that, so it's like it's kind of commonplace now. You don't have to acknowledge the subject doesn't have to acknowledge who's taking the photo. Is there a concern there that it's so normalized, like everybody's just got their phones out and snapping pics? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing in your opinion in relation to analog? And then also, is there concerns where, you yourself, you're taking analog photos, but you're posting them on a digital medium on a platform like Instagram, where somebody can take that, you're talking about propaganda and things like, so it's a two-part question. So like there's that part, but then like when you publish it, you do need to publish in digital, it seems like nowadays, because that's the way people consume stuff.
Yep.
But then people can also take things very easily, misappropriate things, attribute to something that you had no intention, or remix it or edit it or take it as their own, etc.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm trying to remember the first part of the question. It was concern about digital being like at everybody's hands. So yeah, I don't have like a huge concern about it. I think that like the fact that we are now like able to use footage from people's phones to like help in like crimes and stuff is really important. But like also sometimes like now everybody's just like recording everything and like posting everything about their lives. And sometimes I myself, like Instagram like came about when I was like 12. So I've grown up with this, and it's like, I think that sometimes myself, I even feel like my online presence is more my real life than my real life is. And it's like weird. Like I don't feel like that all the time, but there are sometimes where I'm just like so absorbed in that. And I like don't remember that that's not what life is. But as for the second part of the question, I'm trying to remember was
concerns about, even though you're shooting an analog,
yes,
you're publishing on a digital platform online. And putting it out online where somebody can.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much to reappropriate something or misappropriate something or steal something, especially now that we're in a digital world.
I'm not as concerned with appropriating than I am with response to stuff that you put online. Like I know the integrity of my photograph, so I'm not like concerned if someone like takes it or like tries to do something else with it. But like the main thing that I've seen that can usually be a good thing, but is scary when you see the bad side of it, is like when something like causes conversation and like you see like how fucked up people are in the comments, I guess. Like when I was making work primarily about like gender and womanhood, the amount of crazy comments I would get on photos that were like so like beyond misogynistic, just like straight up like messed up, like what the hell is going on. There's a lot of that, and that was like really frightening, but it also like inspired me to see how important photography is, because it like starts conversations like that. But I guess that's where the internet is like scary, because like I feel like nowadays, like there's so many white supremacists everywhere, like all over the internet. And it's like, oh my God, like what is going on? And they have the power to like post things and like not get it deleted. And
they
like,
also don't seem to work jobs.
Yeah. It's like, they don't seem to really do anything except like be crazy. So it's just like horrifying. So that's where I'm like a little worried, but yeah.
So going along, like you stated, seeing these crazy comments, seeing things from like white supremacists drives you even further
Yes.
to use photography as a storytelling
Yes.
medium and tell the stories you want to tell.
Yes.
Which leads into my question: if you could dive further and talk about this project, I want to make sure I got the title right. The Americans.
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm looking at some of these pictures now, and I did see the exhibition at Cortland Club, the pop-up, which was great. Can you talk about more just the ideation of that, how the idea came about, what inspired you to put this together, how you're getting funding for it, because I know there's a GoFundMe, the work that's going into it, and just more, how much did you have to think about the storytelling aspect of it as well, the story you wanted to tell, and how does somebody tell a story just through a photograph or a series of photographs? If you could just walk through that whole entire process from ideation to from ideation to the exhibition, because this is your project, this is your thing.
Yeah, this is my thing. So I would say that it started with Fall River Boys, me seeing that era last summer. I saw that and I was like, hey, wait a second, these were shot on large format film. And I think that I'm learning how to use that in the coming semesters. And so I started to do my research and I was like, I want to be on top of my game when we start learning large format so I can jump in right away and start making pictures. So all throughout the winter, I started learning how to use large format, even though I didn't even have a camera. I was just watching videos all the time to understand how it worked. And I'm not sure exactly. It was one of those things where it's like you're in the shower and you just like something clicks and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this. It was definitely after the exhibition, but I was like, hey, not seeing a lot of representation in my community. I feel like now that I realize I have the power to make this work, someone's going to do it and it's going to be me. And that's what I started doing. And I basically put out this call for models that like weren't really models, if that makes sense. I just like put on my Instagram and I was like, hey, I'm a photographer. I'm looking to shoot a thesis with primarily Asian people, Southeast Asian, South Asian, like Northern, Eastern, like whatever. If you identify as Asian, I would love to have you in my project, even if you're half, even if you're adopted, blah, blah, blah. And there was so many responses. It was insane. And I had been wanting to make this project for a while because I knew it would help me get closer with my own community in Providence. And I was just like, let me extend it out into like Dorchester and Lowell, because there's huge Asian communities, specifically like Cambodian communities in like Lowell and whatever. So I was like, let me extend it out so I can like get all the people that I love together and like start making work, because I was like, it kind of sucks going to like a museum and like not seeing anybody that looks like you on the wall, except for when they like steal like pots from your country and like put it out on display. You know what I mean? So yeah, I was like, let's start this project. I made this giant Google form and I started making like Excel spreadsheets of like who was where and what their ethnicity was and what was their connection to their family and immigration and like their culture. And I started to like compile a list of who would be available during my spring semester last year to take some pictures. And yeah, I shot like 30 people in the month of April, which is like something I've never done before. I wasn't even like burnt out. I was like so excited to be taking pictures. I would like drive from like Peabody, Massachusetts back to like Providence in a day to shoot like 2 people when I wasn't in school. The darkroom process was equally as tedious. Like, I feel like I did spend more time in the darkroom than I did shooting. Like, I would go there on the weekends and I would spend all day in the darkroom by myself developing, printing and everything, and just making sure that I got things right. Like, I had friends making sure that I was eating and like blah, 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 but I didn't like regret it for a minute. Like, I was always frustrated because I wanted things to be perfect. But yeah, and I would like sit down for like private critiques with my teacher of the work throughout the semester, and like she was like explaining to me like that I need to like figure out a way to like show how my community has been like changing the American landscape, because like one of the primary goals of my project, in addition to like representation, was also like combating all of this like anti-Asian rhetoric that was happening during the pandemic. And like a lot of this stems from like xenophobia that's existed like since before Asian people got here in the 1800s. Just this constant idea that like Asian people can't be Americans, like they're always foreigners. And like a lot of the sentiment during the coronavirus pandemic was like, you need to go back to your country. Your country brought this here. And it's like they're saying that to people that have lived here forever. And it's just like a wrong thing to say, to blame a pandemic on anybody. But yeah, so that's where the sentiment of the project was also coming from. And I started thinking, how can I show what the Providence Asian community has been doing? And like, they look like people that you see every day on the street. Like, who do I know like fits that profile? Like stuff like that, where I've just been going around and photographing. And yeah, like sometimes it would be like me setting up a scene, or sometimes it would be like, hey, it's Buddhist New Year on this day, I'm going to go to the temple, like stuff like that. And then the title of the project, I'm running out of breath. The title of the project. There is this project by Robert Frank, who is this like European large format photographer who came to the US, and he just like went around taking pictures of American people, and it was called The Americans. And there was like nothing wrong with the project. Like, I think it was like really cool, but I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if I titled my project this like infamous title of the other project everybody knows by Robert Frank, and be like, these are the real Americans? Because like in that one, not the real Americans, but I was just like, oh, like we are Americans too. And there was just like in that book, there wasn't really a lot of representation of the communities of color except for photos of segregation. And I was like, well, that's not really cool, and that's not what we want to be remembered by. So I was like, let me just call it The Americans. And like I knew it was gonna like piss off some of my professors and make them be like, you should be more original, or like something like that. But I was like, that's exactly what the project is about. It's about like bringing my community into this photo canon. And like I was like, what more is this photo canon than like The Americans by Robert Frank? So yeah.
You had mentioned, the hey, we're Americans too.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads into my question of how important do you think it is for the subject or the viewer or the consumer, I would say, how important is it for them to see themselves in the media they are consuming, and what effect does that have?
Yeah, I would say that like a lot of the reason why I am so passionate about all of this today is because like I wasn't seeing myself or like other people of color represented in mainstream media at all. And when we were represented, like Asian people were always represented as like either really smart or like really nerdy or like didn't speak English or like blah, 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 all of the stereotypes. And like going to a museum and seeing a picture of yourself or someone that looks like you is really important, because like when we think of museums, like it's kind of cheesy, but like in a way, like these are the people deciding what is important for everybody to be looking at. So it's like when you finally have your own community or a community close to yours like represented, it's like, oh, like here's me thinking that I'm important. Like the project is really meant to be a mirror for the Asian community, so they can like see themselves or like see people that they know, or just like see like a general depiction of like their experience being regarded as highly as anything else in a museum.
Can you explain and expound upon, because I think it's a powerful quote you made, photographs of your community inspire unity? Can you dive into that?
Yeah. So that was also like a part of my like artist project statement that was used when I displayed this at school at the end of the year. And like, yeah, like the same way that like representation in like a museum or whatever, or like on media of whatever sorts is like really important. Like when you see the initiative to like see your community represented, it like sparks this chain reaction of not only like people like being like, oh, hey, like that's my aunt, or like, hey, that looks like me. It also is like, oh, like, why don't we start doing similar things? Or like, this makes me remember how passionate I am about this other thing. Like, I haven't had this much like support for my work like ever. And that's like the whole point of this, like the community aspect of the work. Like so many people came and showed out at like the Cortland Club thing. And like, there's like I mentioned off the air that like Cow like was like, oh, hey, like we want to donate some of the proceeds to your work. Like that was completely them coming up to me and saying like, hey, like we see the importance of your project. We want to like, I don't know, bring you in and like show you that you are our community as well. So like stuff like that is really important. It makes us all like sentimental and be like, yeah, like we care about each other and now we're seeing each other.
So you mentioned working with Cortland Club for this project and Cow reaching out to you. You're in this talk about representation and things that matter. You've worked with a lot of clients, both big and small, different sizes, right? In more the commercial editorial fine art space. Has there been a client where things were problematic, whether it was from like just a logistics standpoint or even a representation standpoint, or was there a client that reached out to you that first you're like, hey, I'll do this, and then you find some information about the company or about the the magazine or the whatever the organization happens to be that you just didn't like, and how did you handle that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of things that I can't like. This is one of those things where I'm like a little worried about saying too much. But like I mentioned earlier, like my highest paying job had the most issues. Like we got a makeup artist fired on that set because she literally like, why would you hire a white 7-year-old makeup artist to do foundation on like an entirely POC
7-year-old?
Yeah, she's 70.
Oh, I think it's 7.
No, not a little girl. She was an old lady. And yeah, like the entire cast was POC and she literally like was insulting everybody. Like it was so messed up. I won't even go into it, but yeah. Then there have been jobs where like there's one time this company was like, hey, we want to like do some like e-commerce stuff with you. We're hoping that you can find this type of model. And then we also want you to find a plus size model. I found a plus size model, one of my good friends, and I said, hey, this is her size. Like, can you send over the garments in this size? And they were like, oh, we don't have that size. And I was like, you asked me for a plus size model. You don't carry plus size garments. Like, this is literally just performative. So it's like stuff like that. And I ended up not taking the job. I recently have been better at like speaking up for the models who are usually the ones being misrepresented and mistreated. And I was just like, hey, I don't feel comfortable taking this job. I think that this is really messed up that you asked me for this and can't even provide her the right size. And that was me with the makeup artist too. I was like, hey, I heard about the makeup artist doing this, this, and that, and shame on you guys for hiring her. Like, you should have realized. What are you going to do about it? So yeah, but if it like happened to me, you know what I mean? Like if someone like said something to me and mistreated me, I would feel like way less inclined to say something because that's like scary, if that makes sense, because you don't know if people are going to back you up. But if you're speaking out for someone else, I feel like it's a little easier and you should do something. Like if you see something, you should say something.
Have you ever had to balance out, or have you ever taken on a job that maybe it wasn't ideal? Maybe it didn't perfectly align, or maybe you were feeling a little iffy about it, but it's like, hey, I also have to pay rent this month.
I don't think so. Like I try to make the most out of everything. Like even if it sucks, I just like try my best. But I don't think anything has really sucked. Like sometimes like I have to like bear through a shoot that's like really overstimulating and like people aren't listening to me, but I'm just like, yeah, I guess that's a situation where I'm like, I gotta pay rent and I'm already here. So yeah.
One thing I've noticed is you received a number of awards. I'm just going to go through. Going to go through these real quick.
Thank you.
6 of the best Asian American photographers in 2022 from the Photographer. Hopefully, I'm saying that correctly.
Like that.
Let's see, and also editorial interviews with other magazines. Let's see, featuring Global Girlhood. Women with Film Wednesday. The 11 best commercial photographers in province from Peerspace. Photographer Spotlight from the C Word magazine. I think Vogue has like an editorial page or something like that they featured you in. Let's see, the 11 Gen Z Asian American photographers capturing the complexities of being AAPI. Sorry, I don't have the... Oh, being AAPI today from Very Good Light. I was reading that wrong.
No, you're good.
My notes. Then there's also Subvert magazine. And then I think Her Campus Artist to Watch. So very early in the game, you already got a number of accolades, awards on your belt, big commercial projects with, and definitely
Yay!
You deserve to celebrate. The Rolling Stone project, right? I think I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember the saying. I think the saying. I could be misquoting this, and if I am, apologies to anybody who knows the technical quote. The idea of flatten your heart, meaning you don't get addicted to the highs, but you don't get addicted to the lows, and you try to keep an even keel. Is there any one particular award or accolade or interview that you were like, oh wow, like this is amazing? And if so, why did that one stand out more than the others? And then the second part of that question, how do you keep a level head, and how important it is to keep a level head that you don't feed into your own hype?
Yeah. I'm going to answer that one first. I am like so self-conscious about my work still. Like I think also because of my age, I feel like really underestimated. So I underestimate myself. I never feel like a single thing on my CV is like legit enough to like get me what I actually want. So it's pretty easy for me to stay down here. And I'm not saying like I'm like super mean to myself. I'm not mean. It's just like I think I'm just still at this point where I'm like, it's not exactly enough yet. And I don't think anything ever will be, which isn't really like a healthy mindset, but maybe it is. I don't really know. But the second part of the question, or the first part rather, recently I got this award from the Mass Art Liberal Arts Department, which was help me out, it's on my website somewhere. It's the intercultural.
I'm trying to.
It's somewhere. I don't remember the exact name, but it had to do with like global. Oh, it was Global Competence and Intercultural Understanding.
There we go. Yep.
Yes, it was a big mouthful. I didn't even know that the Mass Art Liberal Arts Department gave out awards.
And like the Gertrude Kasiber Prize, I think, was also from Mass Art, right?
Yeah. So the one from the Liberal Arts Department was like such a shock for me, and it was like my most like treasured thing that I've ever gotten, because I have taken 2 classes with the professor that awarded me this. The first one was this history course called like Lenses from the Past, which is basically teaching everything that they lie to you or hide from you in American history. So it was like this really impressive course that like opened my eyes to everything that I was suspicious of. And the second course I took with him is like the highest level course you can take at Mass Art, which is like a summative elective. And I took it on the Asian American diaspora. And that's ultimately like the class that helped me get this award. Like it was just, it was an incredible experience. And just to be like honored for my contributions to the community, like in an academic sense, in addition to like my art, was really, really flattering for me, because it just like made me realize how important what I'm doing is, and that my voice means something. And just to have like a teacher recognize me and nominate me for it was just like really nice.
So I want to, because you're mentioning professors, and I think it leads into this question. You have started teaching.
Yeah.
At AS220.
I haven't yet. Next Tuesday.
You're about to, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think so. It's maybe rephrase my question a little bit. How did that come about? What made you want to teach? And I guess actually, first off, explain what AS220 is to anybody listening who doesn't know what it is.
So AS220 is like a lot of things. I first knew about it, and primarily people first know about it as like a music venue in Providence. But they also like have different classes for enrichment, like dance classes, music classes. But they also have art classes. And they
they have like a gallery space. They're doing an exhibition.
They do. They have like the AS220 galleries as well. But yeah, like they also have art classes. They're for youth and adult programs. And they teach like all sorts of stuff. Like, I don't even know, like everything you can think of. I feel like they have someone teaching it, whether it's like a full class or a workshop. But one of the people in my project, Alex Suk, who's also Cambodian, he is, I believe, the creative director for the youth programs at AS220. And I was like, wow, your impact is really important. Do you want to be in my Asian American project? He was like, yes. And you should come by and maybe teach a class. And I was like, oh my God, like that's a great idea. So he's doing some summer courses right now with the kids. And he was like, hey, you should introduce these like Gen Z kids to what large format photography is. And I was like, oh my God, like that's such a great idea, but it's going to be a task. So next Tuesday and Wednesday is going to be our first course, and we're going to be like showing them like what large format is, and like I'm mostly showing them like BIPOC photographers that use large format because it's mostly BIPOC Providence teens. And yeah, just showing them how to use the camera, and like they're going to be taking photos of themselves, and hopefully like they'll like get super into it, because I know some of them were saying that they wanted to shoot film. That's why they brought me in. But yeah, hopefully they bring me back for more classes, because like recently I just was like, I really like teaching. Like I literally refused to be a teacher for so long. And now I'm just like, maybe I'm going to go to grad school and get a master's so I can teach. Cause yeah, I was realizing like, there's like not a lot of people that look like me that are like photo teachers either, excuse me. So yeah, I don't know. I like working with kids. I was going to go to school for elementary ed. So I was like, this is a great opportunity to see if this is what I want. In addition to the commercial stuff, because that was the main interest of mine. But yeah.
So just wanted to ask, so you haven't taught yet, but you had to put like, you had to put curriculum together and like format together, and like how the class is going to flow and things of that, right? Is there anything you learned from just like, oh, I have to prepare and like now I have to teach? Like, is there anything you learned? Is there anything that made you reevaluate the way you did things?
Not really, but the way that I'm teaching is exactly the way I wish large format photography was taught to me, because like the way it was taught to us was, here's the camera, here's how you load the film, go figure it out. And with large format, you can't do that. Like you need to learn about what this camera even does and like how it works and the history of it. And it was really like sad that like I feel like everybody missed out on learning that. So that's like kind of what I've learned in making this curriculum, is like how much it would have been better to learn about all of this stuff. But yeah.
Is there any, this is going to sound like an odd question because just in relevance, and this is not me being ageist, people, so don't at me, anyone, okay? I'm just saying that, being 22, is there anything you could have told your past self? See, you're laughing because that's why it's a little bit of an odd question.
I have a past self.
That's only been on the earth for X amount of time.
Yes, mini Kannetha.
This is me making fun of myself, people. I'm older, right? I literally got gray hair, so it's fine. It's fine. Kannetha, you can call me old. That's fine.
I didn't notice until you said that. So I mean, that's good.
But if there's anything you could have told your past self, you could have told mini Kannetha,
yes,
about just this journey you're gonna take, or anything. I guess you wish you could have told your past self, or anything you wish you could have changed or done differently.
I feel like recently I've realized that all of the like negativity coming from like within the house about what I was doing. Like, I feel like I was not really realizing that it was coming from like a place of concern, and that the more I hide away what I'm doing, like that's such an integral part of who I am. And I want, at least my mom, to understand. So I feel like now I've realized like it would have been better if I started like inviting her to more like shows and like whatever. Like there's obviously like been like turmoil between us because of the stuff that has made me been like, no, I'm never showing my mom what my photos look like. But now I'm just like, yeah, I feel like it's important that I start involving her in more things. Because it not only will like better our relationship, and even if she like doesn't understand it, like I'm hoping that one day she'll like conceptualize everything that I'm trying to do. Because like I recently told her that like the large format cameras that I'm using, like the Khmer Rouge, the genocide group that like did everything in Cambodia, there was a portion of their victims that they photographed before they were executed. And they were photographed on large format. The photos were developed in a darkroom the same way I'm doing now. And I was like, wow, for the Cambodian community, this project is like exceptionally important, like above any other community. Because like we're reclaiming this process. And so I was like trying to explain that to her, but all I got back was like, okay, over text, because she doesn't like understand yet. So I'm hoping that like the more I get her involved, at least like with seeing this project like blossom, she'll start to like understand the importance of photography and like what I'm trying to do, because it is really important.
What do you think the general public doesn't realize, whether it's about maybe the technical aspects of photography, the running the business side of photography, or just maybe your projects, representation? What do you think that maybe one thing or multiple things, however you want to go about it, the general public doesn't realize about what you do that you wish they did?
It's hard because I feel like I have a list of things, but like the first
Feel free to go through them.
the first thing that came to my mind is like, we don't just press a button. Like that's like a very like general reply I think any photographer would say to that. But yeah, like we don't just press a button. There's a lot that goes into this. And like, you know, the second thing is like, there are some photographers like me who anticipate certain responses and like we thrive off of it. Like I said earlier, like when people were commenting like crazy shit on my Instagram, I was like, that's exactly what I wanted. And it's like this weird thing where it's like, we are really smart, and photography is like a social commentary. So it's like, we kind of anticipate a lot of things, and like we're watching you and we know what you're going to say about it. And like, that's something really interesting about it. But yeah, I guess the last thing is that photography like does have the power to like promote change for a lot of things. Like photography, even in the sense of like videotaping, like has really helped a lot of like legislation and like whatever get passed here in America. Whether it's with like racial justice or like climate justice, even. Like how are you going to know that the Amazon is dying unless you have a photo of it, you know? Like stuff like that.
Dream projects that you would want to do? Are there any like that's like, oh, like it would be a dream to work with this organization or this group or to do this kind of thing?
I don't have like anything super specific because I'm like just kind of waiting and I don't want to like get my hopes up for anything, but I'm really hoping that at some point like I get to shoot a cover for a really big magazine. Like I've done like inside stuff within the magazine, but I've never had like a cover that I was like paid to do. So that's like what I'm really hoping for soon. For a while, my goal was like to go to LA like after I graduate, but now I've had this like weird epiphany where I'm just like waiting for anything to happen, and I'm thankful for wherever life takes me in the next year. So I'm just kind of like coasting right now. But yeah, it would be nice to have a cover within the next, we'll say 5 years, to give me some leeway.
Anything coming down the pipeline or any future projects that are coming up?
So I have the AS220 thing next week. Right now, I'm not sure how long it's on display for, but you can see one of the pictures from the Americans at PVD Art Club. It is for sale, but don't buy it because I want to keep it.
I was going to say, why should people not buy it?
I don't know.
Hey, go look at this thing. I really like it. Don't buy it.
Don't buy it because I want to keep
very
it.
Counterproductive.
Only if you check the criteria that I want, you can buy it.
Wait, what is the criteria? There's a checklist now?
If you're Asian, you can buy the photo at DVD Art Club. But yeah, that's another thing. Right now, I'm creative directing and photographing for the Women Project headquarters, which is like a pro-choice group in Providence that's been leading all of the protests.
Very familiar with that that group as my best friend Tammy Brown.
Oh, yeah,
and also former guest on this show.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So I'm working with the Women Project right now on a billboard, so y'all will see it up in Providence soon. We did have to reevaluate the billboard because of what happened a few weeks ago, but yeah, we're working on that to put some more pressure on our government. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the summer. I'll hopefully have some like more formal large scale exhibitions of the Americans so people can come see it. So like keep up with me on social media to stay tuned for that.
That being said, we're at the end.
Cool.
At the end of the show here.
Yay, and, thank you.
And as is tradition on the show, usually I'm against tradition. I think it's just like dead people's baggage and get over it. But I think I created a decent tradition, and I didn't even create it. I stole it. I stole it from Hot Ones. It's the end of the show. We're gonna leave off with you can say or promote. Not that you haven't said anything you wanted before, but you can promote, plug, say, leave out whatever you want. So this is just no questions. This is just an open mic. The floor is yours. Go for it.
I mean, that's pretty much it. Like I said, I'm hoping to have some more opportunities for people to come see my work. I've had a couple messages about, hey, when's your next show? I couldn't come to the last one. I really want to see your project. It's important. If I don't have anything and you're like dying to see it in person, I'm open to people honestly messaging or emailing me to show some like in-person prints. But I'll just like plug my socials. My Instagram is Kannetha with 2 A's, KANNETHAA. And my website is in the link of my Instagram bio. It's www.kannethabrown.com. And yeah, that's I don't have many socials. So I think that's it.
Well, with that being said, Kannetha, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for just talking about your experience and just everything about that goes behind the scenes. Being behind the lens in your photography and your work, which is amazing. That's how we met. I went to the Cortland Club show because I wanted to check it out.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, honestly, folks, please follow her. Check out her work. Go see it in person. Even better. I guess don't buy that particular picture.
Yeah.
But other than that, buy the stuff and support. Just not that one, but like anything else, buy it, support.
Thank you.
Because honestly, it's amazing. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And until next time, everybody, keep on creating. And that's it for this episode of the Creative Capital Show. Thank you for listening, and a special thanks goes to this episode's guest, Kannetha Brown. The Creative Capital Show is hosted, recorded, edited, mixed, and produced by me, Jason Sylvia. You can listen to the Creative Capital Show over at our website, creativecapitalshow.com. We're also available on Anchor FM, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all other major podcast hosting platforms. If you like the show, please subscribe. Helps the show out a lot. And be sure to follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the show, and until next time, keep on creating.